Hey everybody, Brian and Nick here at the butcher shop. Today we are going to process a local lamb for you guys. So we have this lamb, it's a customer's. They donated this lamb to us to be able to do this video. This is a 4-H backup lamb that we have here at the shop that Nick and I processed on the farm kill truck. And we're gonna go ahead and break this down and show you guys the process of breaking down a lamb and some of the things that you can get out of it. So this lamb weighs about 92 pounds on the rail. The way it sits now, we're gonna go ahead and on our staw, we're gonna break off these lamb bones here at the end, and at this end first, go ahead and use those. Customer wants to retain those for dog food. Okay, first thing we're gonna do when we start breaking down this lamb is we're gonna cut off the shank and the brisket here. Then we're gonna come back in behind, we're gonna square cut the shoulder and the picnic off, break off our hind legs, and then we'll split off our ribs and our loin, and we're just gonna go ahead and go through that process real quick. All right, so we have the lamb broken down into what we call primal cuts now. We're gonna take these primal cuts, we're gonna clean them up, break them down a little bit further, and go ahead and get some retail cuts out of these, things that you may see either on the Food Network, a cooking magazine, or something of that nature, or more importantly, may see here in the counter. A lot of times we don't have enough room for all these cuts in the counter. You may see lamb chops, rack of lamb, or possibly a leg of lamb. But we always have shanks available also, and that type of stuff. So we're gonna go ahead and go through the process now of breaking down this lamb. I think we're gonna go ahead and start with the brisket and the foreshank. We're gonna start at the front of the animal and go through and break it all the way down from front to back and show you some of the different things that we can get out of this lamb. All right, so Nick has the two shanks and the brisket here. Everything has two pieces to it for the most part. Lamb shank here. Going to clean up this heavy fat. Lamb fat, as a general rule, doesn't have a real palatable flavor to it. So we're going to trim these up. A couple things you can do with these. You can do a crack shank, which is us cutting through the bone most of the way through the flesh and leaving it attached for soup, stew, or braising, or we can leave these whole. Or you could, very rarely, a customer might want them cross-cut all the way through for like an osso buco type cut. When we're all said and done, we're going to have a little bit of lamb trim for lamb stew, probably a pretty fair amount of lamb fat that will just get discarded. So there's our two front shanks. Right there, we'll probably crack these and go ahead and make lamb shanks out of them here. Next we have our lamb brisket, nice heavy fat cover on the top. The breastbone underneath is also referred to as a breast. We're gonna go ahead and clean this up and peel it. We don't personally have a lot of call for this lamb breast or brisket here at our shop. More times than not, it either ends up in lamb burger or lamb stew, depending on what the customer specifications are. If we're doing a custom lamb for somebody, such as this one, or if we need lamb stew in the retail store, we use typically leg of lamb for that. Has a great flavor. It's nice lean pieces of meat without a lot of gristle in it. I got each side of this lamb breast trimmed up and ready to go for the most part. I'm going to come along each side. Score it like so. And that lamb brisket just peels right off there. Comparable to a beef brisket, just obviously it's lamb, it's a lot smaller, not near as much there available. There's a nice little layer of lamb muscle meat that lays underneath that brisket on the point of the breast that we can get off also. Nick has the lamb neck here. He's going to go ahead and clean this lamb neck up. More times than not, we try to extract as much meat as we possibly can off of the neck. Usually, typically just goes to burger. If a customer's saving the shanks for cracked shanks or something of that nature, a lot of times we'll split this neck down the middle and then cross-cut it into 4 pieces. They can use it in the same method that they would for whatever they're going to use their shank for, whether it be a lamb soup, lamb stew, or something of that nature. The bone gives it a nice flavor. We'll trim the heavy fat. We'll get rid of the heavy tendon that lays down the back of the neck and clean up the meat that comes off here, lean it out for a lamb burger on this particular instance. All right, so we have a nice lamb neck here. We'll cut this down the center here. We'll cross cut it here. We'll have 4 nice pieces. It'll work really well for soup or stew. This face cut up here will get taken off and discarded later. Next, we have the entire lamb shoulder. Has what was typically referred to as the butt portion here, and it would be the arm or the picnic portion here. We would typically get roast out of the arm or the picnic, lamb steaks out of the butt portion. We'll go ahead and get these trimmed up and show you what the retail cuts may look like. Big heavy kernel of fat that lays right up there in the shoulder area. I'll make sure we extract that. Thin layer of meat that lays underneath it, so we can always pull that out for lamb burger. All right, so it's trimmed up, pretty close to ready to go for steaks. We might have to do some final trimming after we actually cut the steaks and the roast, but we got a good baseline to start on here, so when we get to the saw, we're ready to go. All right, next we have our riblets. I broke this lamb down so we can do a rack of lamb for you in just a moment. So the riblets are a little bit small. They could typically be about 3 to 4 inches wider in length, but with the way that we broke this particular lamb to do the racks, they get shortcut a little bit. So we're just going to go ahead and extract the meat out of them that we can down here on the flank. So you can see lambs have quite a bit of fat on them, especially a nice healthy fat lamb like this. Pull that little felt off, get a nice little lamb riblet there. Pretty meaty for what it is. All the fat's been trimmed off. Make a nice little product when it's all said and done. All right, next we have the lamb loins. We've already pulled the kidneys out on the day of the farm kill, so the kidneys are already extracted. We save those aside. Now we're gonna get rid of this heavy kidney fat that sits inside here. All right, so we have 2 sections of the loins. We have the rib end, which is where you get your rack of lamb. We have the loin and sirloin end, which is usually where you get your lamb loin chops. We're going to break this down a little bit further so we can do the rack of lamb. We'll do one regular, we'll do one Frenched, and we'll have our lamb loin chops and our sirloin chops. But before we do that, we need to trim off all this heavy fat on the back and get this lamb loin ready to go. Part of this will actually start to peel as it changes. You got to use your knife a little bit more, making sure to stay in the fat, not in the loin. I'm going to do here is I have the whole rack. I'm going to take this chine bone off here, and I'm going to take these feather bones off here, so that once this lamb rack is cooked, all you have to do is slice in between the ribs here, and you'll have nice lamb chops. So we're going to remove all this here so that it's ease of cooking and slicing once it's all cooked. So I'm going to remove the rest of these feather bones off the back. There's a little rubber band muscle or tendon that sits on the back side here. We want to make sure we extract that. All right, so Nick has a regular rack of lamb there. It's been all cleaned up, has not been Frenched. All the fat's still left on the rib bones. The feather bones have been extracted off the back. If somebody want to do a long rib chop or a regular rack like that, that's what we would use for that. This lamb loin here, or rack, we're going to go ahead and French. Frenching is where you take the fat and the stuff off in between the ribs and pretty much just leave the loin itself where the chops are. All right, so now we have a Frenched rack of lamb. Same loin as this here, just been Frenched, so the ribs have been exposed. Adds a little bit of flair, a little bit of pizzazz, kind of gives us that high-end look. All right, we have our lamb loin chops here and our sirloin chops. Shorten this tail up a little bit. That'll get leaned out and become lamb burger. Alright, we'll go ahead and cut you some lamb chops. I prefer to knife my lamb chops. I think it makes a little bit nicer product. It's going to help eliminate some of the bone dust. Makes a fresher, nicer product. So you can see these lamb loin chops. I knifed them here on this side. Wasn't able to go through the loin or the bone on the loin. So we basically just had to cut this chine bone on the back. But this cutting in this way gives us a nicer, prettier lamb chop. It's going to stay fresher in the counter longer. It's going to have a nice color, and it doesn't have any bone dust. Anytime you have a mechanical action like a saw going through something, it causes heat and smear of product, and it just doesn't have quite the same look to it. That's why we prefer to do that here at the butcher shop. All right, so now we're going to go into the ever popular leg of lamb, mostly eaten here in our region around Easter or Christmas. Spring Lamb Fair here at Jackson County Fair is in June. A lot of people will purchase lambs at the fair. We will do a custom cut and wrap on those lambs for them. A lot of businesses, private parties, and they take those home and they're able to enjoy that lamb anytime they want throughout the course of the year. Break this down into the two legs that it is, cutting through the H-bone, removing the last little piece of tailbone that's in there. Give one to Nick. You want to do bone in or boneless? Okay. I'm going to do a boneless leg of lamb. Nick's going to do a bone-in leg of lamb. They're going to be trimmed up very similar, but we're going to extract the bone out of one and leave the bone in the other one just to show you a couple of the options that are available. So we got Nick's leg of lamb here. Has the H-bone right here, which is basically the pelvic bone. We're going to go ahead and remove that out of our leg of lamb here, even though we're going to leave the femur bone still attached in the center. We're going to remove that H-bone, similar to what I'm going to do on the boneless leg of lamb, but I'm going to go a little bit farther and extract all the bone out of that. It just makes it easier for once this lamb leg is cooked for slicing to not have to deal with this bone, and it's just going to make a better product at the end of the day, and it just takes a few moments to go ahead and take it out of there. You now have the socket of the femur bone exposed where it would have went into the pelvic bone, and you no longer have that big bone to deal with when it comes time after this is cooked and ready to slice up. Now we're going to come in on the sirloin tip side, expose that femur. The shank out of the way. right, so we got a boneless leg of lamb here. We're gonna open it up. We have the lamb that sits right down here at the end. Gonna open up the top round portion. There's a big kernel of fat that sits back here on the bottom round portion. We want to extract that out of there. All right, so we're gonna put this in a jet net and put it back together. If you were doing a butterflied leg of lamb, which is another option, you would open this all up, lay it out nice and flat like so. But we're not going to do a butterflied lamb, but if we were, that's how we would do it. We're going to put this leg of lamb back together. All right, do that. Put this all back together, fill in any voids or pockets of air or emptiness in the center so that it cooks nice and uniform and fully. We have a nice leg, hind leg shank, all cleaned up and ready to go. Okay, we're going to take off these first couple ribs. There's a heavy layer of fat that sits underneath those. We want to make sure we get that out. All right, those are just a few of the lamb cuts you can get out of the lamb. Generally, more times than not, we don't have the space available on the retail counter for all these cuts or any of these cuts. We always have the major ones available, the racks, the loins, the legs, the shanks. We always have those available. If you're looking for something else that we don't have, call us ahead of time, let us know. We can order it, we can get it in for you. Any special events or something you have, hit us up, we can get it, we have access to it. But as always, guys, let us know what you need. We're happy to take care of your needs and get you taken care of for whatever event or just special dinner you may have coming up.